So the adventurer is coming out of the experiential brain, and it's the extroverting of that particular function. Why do we talk about relationship styles? Well, it has a huge impact for all of us, whether we are thinking about our relationships in our personal life, our primary relationships with our spouses, or with other family members, even with our children. It does have a significant impact. It also impacts us at work if we do not understand our relationship style or the relationship styles of others. It can also make a really big difference. We can misinterpret the actions and behaviors of others. We can, react differently if we don't understand where they're coming from relationally, or we might even move to judge them. I was talking about that with a client earlier today. So relationship styles, knowing our relationship styles is so important. Knowing about the needs that drive our behavior in our relationships is very, very important. The adventure is rooted in the the left emotional brain, so what we call the experiencing function. So this is all about what is going on in our world. It's the sensing function for those of you that are used to the Myers-Briggs language, but it really is about what is happening in the moment or what has happened in the past. And so this is the left emotional brain that we're talking about, the experiencing function. The predominant need of the adventurer, the predominant need of the ESTP, ESFP type is to be spontaneous, okay? So what does that mean? What does that mean to be spontaneous? What does that look like? How does that play out when we think about it in the context of relationships? So with the adventure, the extroverting of the sensing function really does speak to the fact that they want to go out and have a variety of experiences. This is really, really important. Don't like repetition, don't like to feel constrained, don't like boundaries to be set. So it's really driven by a need for freedom and freedom in their experience, okay? They're very open-minded, they're very tolerant, but really what they go after are new experiences and stimulation. So if this is your style, probably going to recognize that right away and say, oh yeah, I'm always looking for what are we going to do? What are we going to do next? And how am I going to challenge myself? Physical mastery is part of it. A little bit daredevil components to it. So the adventure is that spontaneity, right? That really free-flowing, open, what can I do in my experience that's going to stimulate me? And so that spontaneity, that variety of experience is a big part of it. Very, very action oriented. We see this when this style is in the work environment. They have a really strong bias for action. They prefer jobs where they are always moving and going and responding and doing because that, again, really satisfies their need. And as I said earlier, part of that desire for freedom, part of that seeking out stimulation means that there's a high risk-taking orientation to this group, right? So that daredevil component, right? So how do I push the boundaries? How do I push the limits? And getting engaged in activities that may sort of border on, depending on where you're doing them and how they're doing them. You can even see them moving into things like gambling and speeding and racing and those sorts of things. And so not without judgment, but again, it's that stimulation, right? It's that new experience. It's that excitement and that thrill that comes with it. This style, this relationship style is highly sociable, very confident in that social context, friendly, adaptable. You get the picture. They go along, right? They get along. There's nothing rigid or controlling about this style. It is really what you see is what you get. But they're fun. They're really fun to be around. And their primary driver in that, that need to be spontaneous, though, too, is that they're seeking gratification of their own needs, right? Because it's about what satisfies them, what makes them feel the way that they want to feel. And as a result of that, they can really be led around by impulses and by their senses, right? Their five senses. Can I touch it? Can I feel it? Can I smell it? So again, it's a very much a sensing, experiential, in the moment. What am I doing? How is that making me feel? And again, pushing out on those boundaries and having a lot of fun and excitement. So they're great to be around. Great, lots of fun. Can be a little bit challenging, right? If you're in a relationship with them, because they're not driven to act for the future. It is about the now, right? It's about what's going on in the now. What's my variety of experience? So planning out, envisioning the future, not the strength, not the style of this type, very much sort of the go with the flow, which means they may not necessarily even plan for their careers. They might not plan for their savings. They might, sort of all of those things can be a little bit more challenging when you're in a relationship with an adventurer. So because it's always about seeking that enjoyment, seeking those pleasurable sensations, that's what they're going for, and that's what you're on for. And if you're in a relationship with someone of this style, then part of the sort of the draw and the attraction is just how lively and entertaining and fun. It's very important for them to have lots of friends, and again, lots and lots of energy, right? Always on the go, always out there doing and experiencing. It can be a little bit hard for some people to keep up with them, and it's all about in the moment. Okay, so that's the style. When we talk about the adventurer, the ESTP, the ESFP, that's really sort of what's driving, or that's the behavioral pattern that really comes along with them. When we think about it in terms of what satisfies them, what they really look for in their relationships, a couple of things: they need freedom. Okay, so they rebel against too many rules, too much control, too much restraint, too many systems, processes, expectations. You can all have them sort of pushing out against that. They need lots of play and social time. Okay, and so they will, get their work done so that they can go out and they can play, and they're always going to want to be moving and doing, laughing, having fun, telling stories. Again, real natural entertainers, and again, that need to take risks. So if you're in a relationship with someone of this style and you're risk adverse, you're going to want to have to negotiate that. They don't think about the implications of their actions or the possible consequences, right? It's all about that bias for action, that moving and that going and that doing. Now, in relationships, we always have those things that will cause us to feel dissatisfied. And need dissatisfiers are essentially interactions, conversations, activities that we may have to engage with that really frustrate that predominant need of ours. And then again, in the case of the adventurer, it's the need to be spontaneous. So ESTP, ESFP, all driven by the need to be spontaneous. And so when our needs are being frustrated and when we're feeling that sense of, or those dissatisfiers are present, it can be really difficult to feel any kind of sense of satisfaction. Also, if they're present, we are more likely to become easily irritated, to become depressed or angered or frustrated, pick fights, find fault with others, blow up our lives, whatever it may be. It's like we move into that place where it's like, I can't get any level of satisfaction, and so I have to pick at something in order to get at. And then we see the engagement in the non-productive behaviors. So when we think about the adventurer and what are the things that cause them to feel dissatisfied in their relationships, well, first and foremost, if you think about their need is to be spontaneous, one of the number one dissatisfiers for them is making them conform. Putting them in a situation where they have to go along and do things exactly how others expect them to do it. Okay? So relationships can actually be very difficult for this style, because while they love to be with people, when other people are trying to curb them, to get them to conform, to rein them in, that actually causes them to feel a high level of dissatisfaction in the relationship. They're easily bored, right? And they may not be as dependable in the sense that you look to others, and particularly the stabilizers, which we'll be talking about next week. They can ignore routines, they can be impulsive, and moving to make them conform and trying to contain and restrict them is only going to actually create more problems in that relationship, right? Okay. The next thing is, and really along the lines of that, is that being criticizing or controlled. They have to have variety. They need that constant stimulation, that constant activity, and they don't like being limited to having to do the same thing the same way every day. They want to be able to have that variety of experience. That's really, really important to them. So any level of controlling them, and that's why family life can be particularly challenging for them, because of course, and when we move into family life, we're looking for routines and repetition and predictability, and they will often find that living with others can be too complex for them because those obligations, and they want to bail on them, or they'll take off, or they say they'll be somewhere and then they don't show up, right? So again, it can be really dissatisfying for them if they're in a relationship with someone who doesn't have a partner, or who has a partner who expects them to kind of follow along and really limit their activities and shrink their world. Because again, that variety, that open, that daredevil, take risks, go out, variety of experience, all really, really important to them. They love to travel. They really like to go out and be able to, experience brand new things, and every single day wanting to have an adventure. They're also the ones, we always laugh about this, they're also the ones that are more likely to spontaneously, like last minute club kind of folks take off without a plan, just show up somewhere and figure it out as they go because they're okay with that, right? They're very open and they can really go with the flow more so than any of the other styles, okay? The last dissatisfier for this style, of course, is having others overschedule them, okay? And they want to be able to go out and have that variety, but again, if they are being told that they have to do things or people are booking their stuff in and not leaving them that time for their activities, again, they can become really rebellious, both actively and passively. And so things that we always want to watch for. When we think about each and every one of the relationship styles, we always talk about the fact that they have a set of predictable self-protective behaviors that really do come with being in this style, right? We have our self-actualizing behaviors, we all have it, and we have our self-protective behaviors. These are hardwired patterns of behavior that we rely upon, and our self-protective behaviors are always going to get triggered when our needs are not being met. So what you're watching for, if you are in a relationship with an adventurer, or if you are an adventurer yourself, an ESTP or an ESFP, you want to be aware of these behaviors so that you can watch for them. And you want to become consciously aware of them, because the more aware you are of them, the more you're actually going to be able to then go back and say, hey, wait a minute, my self-protective system's been triggered. This is how I'm behaving. I recognize that. This is what's going on, and how do I negotiate, or how do I make changes in order to be able to do that? So some of the self-protective behaviors that we see from the adventure, first and foremost, are refusal to plan. And so they create uncertainty, instability. They won't make commitments. They won't agree to anything. I remember one of my friends she's married actually to this individual. She's in a relationship with him for a very, very long time. They've been together from, I think, the time they were in high school. And, we always saying, when are you going to get married? And she'd always say, I don't know. And because, he won't make a plan with me for that. And so every year when they went down south, she would pack a white dress just in case that was the trip where he decided to say, hey, why don't we get married? Because she knew that the second he said, why don't we get married, they would be doing it right then and there. It wouldn't be, hey, let's get married, let's have a plan, let's have a wedding. It would be, hey, let's get married. So this is that kind of thing where when they're being self-protective, that can really frustrate the people that they're in a relationship with, because they can be really inconsistent and feel like they're not willing to commit, even though they are really, really committed. They get bored easily. And that means they can abandon relationships when they become serious. They can create conflict in their relationships by avoiding things that are routine and in their mind boring. So the more mundane aspects of life that we all know that we have to deal with. They don't have a high tolerance for interpersonal conflict, and so they won't address issues, and they're more likely to kind of take off or try and joke their way out of it, make it fun and make it light. The other really clear evidence of this style being self-protective is they act rebelliously. And so they'll appear to be in agreement. You think they're coming along with you, but then they'll go off and do something really, really different. I always say, I've got a lot of clients where, this style might be their, sort of their second or their third. And so it really does get activated in them. And it's that impulse to I'm taking my toys and I'm going home, leaving the sandbox and I'm going home kind of thing, right? It's like if things aren't going the way, they don't necessarily know how to kind of work through the conflict, and so their impulse, which they get very, very activated around their impulses. It's the nature of that experiential function, right? And then wanting to be spontaneous. It's like, that's it, that's fine, this isn't fun anymore, I'm out of here, I'm off and I'm going home. So again, it's that impulsiveness that we really want to watch for if this is your style or you're in a relationship with someone of this style, because it can be really detrimental to the relationship, to the long-term plans. They can do things impulsively, like make a decision to stop doing something or to leave something without really thinking it through in terms of the future consequences, because they're not future oriented. They're very much living in the moment, right? And they can make some changes without even consulting people, because again, they're not thinking about it. And not thinking about how their behavior might actually be impacting on others, because it's very self-focused. It's all about self-gratification, and that other awareness isn't necessarily there as a result of that, okay? And then the last one I'm going to just say on this is that they really sometimes don't, they can really struggle to see that bigger picture. When you think about, we're in the experiential brain, the bigger picture is up here in the right rational brain. So that's their least developed function. And so they can again, act excessively without thinking about the impact, right? Like drinking too much because they're not thinking about the fact that they have a big meeting the next day, or they can be irresponsible without thinking about the consequences of the action. They can spend too much money without thinking about the fact that that's going to leave them without enough money to pay their rent. Again, this is just when they're being self-protective. When they're working out of their self-actualizing system, they will stop themselves to consider how their behavior might impact and what is their boundary relative to that, so as not to impact and not to squander, right? They can think about others, and they will think about others when they're in their self-actualizing system. It's just these are the kinds of behaviors that we see from them and can expect to see from them when they're being self-protective, which is our clue, whether it's us or someone we're in a relationship with, that they're in their self-protective system. And so then what do we need to do in order to support them to shift back out of their self-protective and into their self-actualizing system? So here are some tips for enhancing your relationship with an adventurer. First and foremost, don't try to make them into something that they're not. And that often happens, right? Get into a relationship with them, start to get serious, and then think, oh, I like all these things about them, and then we move to change them. It doesn't work for them. Don't put your energy into it. Don't try and get them to conform to what you think they should be like, okay? Acknowledge what it is that they do well, right? Most adventurers spend most of their life being told what they do wrong. Right? Because they don't conform, because they are always working out of their experience and their own rules and their own ideas about what's going to satisfy them. And so don't fall into that habit of always correcting them, always telling them wrong. Focus on them, the positive. Focus on what you really, really appreciate about them and what it is that they bring to your relationship. Hold fast with the consequences that you give, because you're going to need to give consequences, and don't let them off the hook with a, oh, I'm so sorry. Apologizing comes really, really easy for them, but changing their behavior does not, okay? So you can end up compensating for them, making excuses for them, and we want to break that cycle in particular, being really clear on the consequences and then holding them to it, okay? Keep the commitments direct and concrete, okay? So they can have difficulties with metaphors, abstract concepts. Give really, really clear, real life examples that they can relate their own experience to, and that's going to really help you in terms of directing their behavior. Again, useful at work, at home, or even with children, right? When we're trying to, say, don't say something to them like, well, you need to have more common sense, because that's an abstract metaphor, and really bring it down to, you need to think about X, Y, and Z when you're making this kind of decision in the future. Try to have fun with them. Really learn to pick your battles and focus on play. And if you're having to balance out some of the more mundane aspects of it, figure out how you might make that fun, or how you might maybe even find someone else to do it so that you're both alleviated to it, or agree to what's in their lane and what's in your lane and try and balance it out that way. Really recognizing the kinds of things that they're going to do and they will do very well might not be exactly equal in your mind, but there's other ways in which to distribute the work around, right? Again, allow them to learn through their experiences, not through explanations. They learn by doing, right? Very tactile style. And so they're really hands-on. They get really frustrated when being told how to do something. So show, don't tell, and then let them figure it out from there, okay? And just one more, it's like resist. I'm actually going to focus on the risk one. So I talked a little bit up front about how they're risk takers. They can end up in relationships with people who are not. So just be really clear on your tolerance for risk with them, okay? Negotiate with them for saying, this is how far I will go. I will try this. I won't try that. And allow them to go off and do things on their own without you that are outside of your comfort zone, okay? And don't let them charm you into doing things that you don't want to do. This is really important, because then you're going to frustrate your own needs, and then you're going to create dissatisfaction, and you're going to get triggered into your self-protective system. It's okay to say to them, hey, that's your thing. Go for it. Have a great time. I can't wait to hear all about it, but I'm going to sit this one out. Or I'll come watch you, but I won't do it with you, right? So it's, again, being really clear on your own sense of what's okay, what's within your tolerance for risk, what are some of those non-negotiables. I have one of my clients who's in a relationship with an adventurer, and they very early on in their relationship agreed to a financial safety net. And so that financial safety net is there. A certain amount has to be contributed to that financial safety net. And so instead of setting a budget, it was sort of doing coming in on this level as my risk tolerance is here. I need to have this for me to feel safe and secure. And so they can honor that, and then they don't end up putting that safety net at risk as part of the agreement. And then if they hadn't have had the conversation, if she'd instead come at it and said, well, here's the budget, you need to stick to the budget, you can't spend, or that's, you spent too much there, those sorts of things, absolutely would have rebelled against it. It would not have worked. But the concept of, a clear number, here's a number, we have to have X number of dollars in our account at all times, we can never go below that, that actually made it really clear and really concrete for them to follow along with.